If some big company approached you and told you they're gonna buy your house and tear it down, would you take the money or fight tooth and nail to keep your home? Given I just bought my home, I'd fight tooth and nail. Sort of like this guy who took on the government for years, or this woman who fought off not one but two real estate magnates to keep her home. Mary Cook. Once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far... I'm just kidding here. This was actually in the West End Avenue in 1893. There was this fancy schmancy building designed by Clarence Fagan True, who was probably the Frank Lloyd Wright of his day. One of the houses in the building in number 249 belonged to the Cook family. Mary Cook's husband passed away in 1913, and the developers started circling around like sharks, smelling blood in the water. The developers tried to convince Mary to sell, but Mary wasn't going to give up her beautiful home without a real fight. So what did the developers do? Well, they went all Godzilla on the building and destroyed it, leaving only Mary's house standing like a sore thumb. Mary was one tough cookie, and she held out until 1932 before passing away. Don't worry though, this story does have a happy ending. Mary's house was eventually turned into an art gallery, and then into several apartments, and now people can call Mary's little beacon of hope their home. Austin Spriggs. Austin Spriggs and his wife Gladys thought they had hit the jackpot when the convention center opened near their home in Washington, D.C. They bought their home for $135K in the once rough neighborhood decades earlier. But when developers started buying up properties, they were actually offered $1.5 million. That's an amount, though, that was not enough for the Spriggs, apparently. The couple held out for $10 million because, hey, greed. When developers found the price too outrageous, and who can blame them, Austin decided not to sell and just open a pizzeria instead. That plan, however, fell through. Years later, Spriggs found himself surrounded by towering developments and regret, and put the house up for sale at the original offer of $1.5 million. Surprise, surprise though, no one wanted it until it went into foreclosure and was bought by developers for far less. They turned it into a restaurant and flipped it for nearly $4 million, a far cry from Spriggs' original demand. Sometimes greed simply don't pay off. Encircled by a highway. Imagine waking up one day to find an overpass surrounding your apartment building. Talk about a prime example of urban planning gone wrong. In the bustling city of Guangzhou, 3 families had to endure this bizarre predicament. This is after local authorities failed to remove them from their homes before the highway's construction in 2008. Of course, the government was ready and willing to buy the property off them, and you'd think that the residents would have jumped at the chance to take the compensation offered and flee the chaos. But nah, too easy. The authorities were left scratching their heads and wondering how to deal with this stubborn trio. In the end, they had no choice but to construct the overpass around the buildings. To add insult to injury, the local government promised to build a sound barrier to shield the residents from the noise pollution. But surprise, surprise, it never happened. It's unclear whether the families will be able to tolerate the endless noise and pollution, but for now they seem to be holding their ground, and their buildings are still standing. Michael Forbes. 2007, Trump wanted to build a fancy golf course. Thing is, though, his desired location was right next to Michael Forbes' humble abode in Balmedy, Aberdeenshire. Forbes, though, wasn't having it, no matter how much Trump dangled $578,000 and a $64,000 per year job in front of him. In true Trump fashion, he didn't take this rejection mildly. He called Forbes a disgrace and his house a slum, worst trade deal in history. Trump Corporation even tried to bully Forbes by taking away his boat and fencing off parts of his land in 2010. But Forbes wasn't intimidated, and he stayed put. The whole showdown was immortalized in a 2011 documentary called You've Been Trumped. Trump got the last laugh in 2012 when he finally did open his fancy golf course, the Trump International Golf Links. But wait though, there's more. In 2016, Forbes made headlines once again by raising the Mexican flag on his property as a sign of solidarity with the Mexican people who Trump had insulted during his presidential campaign. Oh, I hate politics. Edith Macefield. Edith Macefield, an 84-year-old Seattle resident, became a folk hero in 2006 when she turned down a $1 million offer from developers for her humble home in the gentrifying Ballard neighborhood. Her house was only worth $6,000, but the land was worth $101,000. This made her refusal to sell all the more surprising. When asked why she turned down the offer, Macefield famously replied, "I don't care about money. I'm perfectly happy here, and I don't want to move." The developers tried everything to convince Macefield to sell, including offering to build a new home for her in a nearby neighborhood. but she refused all offers. In the end, the developers had no choice but to build around Masefield's small home. After Masefield's passing in 2008, her property was bequeathed to Barry Martin, the construction manager of the new building, who had formed a friendship with her. Despite rumors of demolition, Martin sold the house for $304,000. It actually still stands today as a symbol of Masefield's resilience and determination. The St. Joseph Catholic Church. 1871, the St. Joseph Church was built in San Antonio by some cool German Catholic community peeps. They went all out with a soaring steeple and fancy stained glass windows that made the building a major landmark. Things got spicy in 1945 when Josk's of Texas department store was like, hey, can we knock down that church and put up a mall instead? The parishioners were like, no. Then they voted unanimously to reject the offer. But Josk was like, we do what we want. And then they built the mall around the church anyway. Nowadays, the church is known as the jewel in the heart of San Antonio, despite being enveloped by a giant mall. It's kind of like wearing a tiara with sweatpants, but it works. Lou Bacon. Okay, check this out. Guy named Lou Bacon, right? Hardworking duck farmer in China who saved up a whopping $77,000 to build his very own home in Wanling. Then the government comes in like a wrecking ball in 2008 and offers to buy his crib for only $28,000 so they can tear it down and put up a highway. Talk about a lowball offer. Lou ain't having it though. Told the authorities where they could stick their offer and holds out for a better deal. For 4 years, this guy and his wife fought tooth and nail for a fair payout. And get this, the government actually built the highway around his house in the meantime. That's some dedication right there. After a long and exhausting battle, Lou finally caved in and accepted a measly $42,000 for his beloved home. Yeah, that's way less than what he spent to build it, but at least it's an improvement on the initial insult of an offer. Sadly, the house was eventually demolished in 2012, and Luo's story went viral around the world. Wu Ping and Yang Wu. Back in the 2000s in China, something new started popping up. Nail houses. These were properties owned by some pretty stubborn people who refused to sell them, even as shiny new developments sprung up around them. One of the most famous nail houses belonged to Wu Ping and her hubby Yang Wu in Chongqing. In 2004, a bunch of developers approached the couple and offered them an undisclosed amount to tear down their home and build a mall instead. But Wu Ping and Yang Wu were not impressed, and they refused to budge, even as their neighbors were bought out. Fast forward a bit, the couple's home was standing on a raised mound right smack in the middle of a construction site. The devs even cut off their power and water supply. Talk about being left high and dry. March 2007, the court ordered the Wus to leave, but they were having none of it. They stayed put and stood their ground, and eventually, thanks to their stubbornness, they did get a new apartment of the same size. Finally, in April of that year, they called it a day on their 3-year battle. Vera Koking. Probably heard of Vera Koking, the spunky retiree who took on none other than Donald Trump in the 1990s to keep her home in Atlantic City. Koking and her husband bought their sweet 3-story house back in '61 for only $20,000 and lived there for years before turning it into a boarding house. But then came the big-time casino developers and they wanted her property. Prime location and all, just a few steps back from the beach and boardwalk, actually. Story's been told many times, but it's still incredible. Koking refused to sell even when Bob Cushing, a penthouse fame, offered her $1 million to move out. So Cushing started building the penthouse boardwalk hotel and casino around her house. Crazy, right? Now the project went belly up when Cushing couldn't get a gaming license. Enter Trump. He scooped up all the land around Koking's house for his Trump Plaza hotel and casino and tried to buy her out. Koking didn't budge, even when demolition crews vandalized her house and set fire to the roof. Trump even asked the city to use eminent domain to condemn her property, but Koking fought back and won in 1998. That's when the New Jersey Supreme Court ruled that her house couldn't be taken away. Koking lived in her beloved clapboard house until 2010 when she moved to California to be closer to family. Unfortunately, the house is now demolished. See you all next time!